So we just did a video on what are syntax and semantics. So now we have to beg the question, how do you figure out if your kid has a question or has a problem
Mm.
with syntax and semantics? I'm Cindy.
I'm Kim.
And I'm Tiffany.
All right. And so, Kim, Tiffany, how do you think we would assess that?
Mm.
You mean whether they know how to write a sentence or whether what their comprehension is?
How do you test whether or not a kid has an understanding of syntax and semantics?
For them to write a couple sentence down of maybe their daily life and see if it matches up with the semantics.
Okay. So, what would you do if you're a dyslexic kid?
I'd
Not
write the most simple, basic sentence. The boy ate.
That is a red flag right there. If you ask a kid to write a detailed sentence and they write like 3 words, the dog ran,
They'll say, "There, I'm done.
I'm
That's it."
done, right? I'm not going to give you anything bigger. And there can be a whole host of reasons behind that. I can't spell it, whatever. So you can look at writing samples, but often our dyslexic, dysgraphic students with dyslexia and dysgraphia
Mm-hmm.
will write less. So not a great sniffer. Well, it's a
Right.
flag, but how do you assess that? Okay, what's another
Mm.
way that you could get at it?
I mean,
Uh,
I have kids who speak so eloquently, but then when they write, it's like the teacher's saying, "You can do better than this."
Okay, so that's a great example. I have a kid who can speak in really great, complex,
With
syntactically
incredible
complex language,
vocabulary.
but then they don't get it down on paper. But does that mean that they have a problem with syntax and semantics then?
They could have a problem with dysgraphia. They could have,
Right.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So the way that you get back to the root of this is you look at spontaneous production. So have a kid write a paragraph on something that should be well within their known skill set. How do I make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? Or why do I take dogs for walks? Right? Anything that's
Mm.
like super accessible, easy to get to, have them write and take a look at their writing. If they write very simple sentences, you can ask them to then do some sentence combining. Let me give you 2 ideas. Can you put them together and make one grammatically correct sentence? Okay.
Got
If
it.
you're not going to elicit that from them because you can't you struggle with writing, so the kid is not necessarily, or the adult is not necessarily going to produce that grammatically correct rich sentence, then we go back and we do it through oral language. And
Mm.
Yeah.
so can you repeat a sentence and repeat it back correctly? So there's
Uh,
a recalling sentence kind of task, okay, which they have on the Clinical Evaluation of Language Fundamentals, 5th edition and 4th edition and 3rd edition, because sentence recalling is so critical. There is a grammatical morphemes. If I give you a pattern, can you follow the pattern of an analogy? Okay.
mm.
Here is one cat. Here are several. And you're supposed to say cats.
Cat.
Okay, that's super simple example. And they build in complexity to go to an analogy. And then in the grammaticality judgment, I give you a grammatically incorrect sentence and you fix it, or I give you a sentence and you have to tell me whether or not it's grammatically correct or not. And
Mm-hmm.
if it's not grammatically correct, you actually have to fix it. So, do you see why those would get to kind of the nuts and bolts of, do I
Mm.
recognize
Mhm.
what's happening and why is it happening? And taking a
Mm-hmm.
look at the kinds of errors kids make in those kinds of
Mm.
tasks tells us a lot about how they hold and work with that as they go to write, and why we end up
Right.
with sentence fragments, run on sentences, those kinds of things. And then once you get, yes, there's a problem with syntax, then you have to go back and do a deeper dive in where are the errors? Do you know the parts of speech? Do you not know what is considered
Mm.
a correct construction of a sentence? All of
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things. Some of what we talked about in the other video about What is semantics? What is syntax?
Sometimes just asking the question, do you know can you give me an example of a noun, a verb? I can't tell you how many, eighth graders and high schoolers, they don't know the labeling system. And
Adjectives and adverbs are even farther out there.
oh yeah, forget those.
But
Yeah.
and I always pull up Schoolhouse Rock for conjunction junction, what's your function? And some of the other ones that they have out there that give kids an anchor for here's a part of speech and the catchy song has explained to me what it does and why.
I mean,
So
this was foundational in our education when we were young, but it's not foundational anymore.
well, it should be when we teach using the science of reading and structured literacy.
True. Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Tell us if
Thank
this is
you.
helpful.